other than that, thanks for stopping by, man. I wanted to bring you on because you are the Commanders guy for our grid, for our network, and I know there's been some rumors swirling around your boy Chase Young, who was
Hmm.
drafted, very high out of Ohio State several years ago. And for the most part, he's shown flashes, of course. But Pittsburgh is definitely interested. That's one of the rumors that are out there, and perhaps in acquiring him via trade. From what I understand, the Steelers are very, very interested, and they're trying to figure out a way to maneuver this trade, although being, because Chase Young has what I think he's owed, I think 11 million this year, and I
Hmm.
believe this Pittsburgh Steelers only have about 16 million in cap space, so they're gonna have to get really shifty um,
Hmm.
if they're able to kind of pull off this trade. So, you know, and on top of that, they still got other guys on the defensive line that either need to get paid or are still pretty suitable. You got Deron Payne, Montez Sweat, I
Right.
believe Jonathan Allen. All these are very, very highly drafted guys, very talented players, and it just seems like Chase Young might be the odd man out. So, Parnell, what are your thoughts? Number one, on the Chase Young situation, and where does he fit in the Commanders organization, and as well, if you have any thoughts on the Pittsburgh deal?
I would love to see Chase Young finish his career as a Washington Commander. I think when healthy, he does make a difference for the team. Now, as you mentioned, we took care of Darren Payne with the contract. I'm glad that we still have him. We have to address Montez Sweat because he's entering free agency. But with Chase Young, the concern, however, is the durability part. When
Right,
he's available and when he's out on the football field, he can produce. But and we also forgot the Commanders, they didn't pick up his fifth year
they
option.
did not.
Right. So they feel like it's a make it or make it year. It's a prove it year for Chase Young. Now in Pittsburgh, he can definitely fit well with that defense. He could provide that type of presence. He can stop the run. He's a freakish athlete. So I think him and Mike Tomlin would definitely work. But Pittsburgh, we're not if you're Washington, we're not going to get any first round picks. Chase Young is not worth a first round
Right.
pick given his durability and the production. So what are we going to get if we're Washington? A second, a third, maybe a fifth for a Chase Young. And plus you mentioned Pittsburgh has like what $16 million left in
Mm-hmm.
cap space. So he could definitely fit in for the Steelers. I would love to see him stay as a Commanders fan. We definitely drafted him that high. We drafted him, I think, number 2 overall
Yep.
back in 2020, right after Joe Burrow.
Yep.
I just think if he's healthy and if he can play, of course, the Commanders, they're going to have to find a way to take care of him. But if he feels like he doesn't want to be with the Commanders anymore, then I have no problem with trading him. And at least we got to get something in return. You can't lose someone like him for nothing.
No, I agree. And like I said before, that your defensive front is super talented. I mean, I think they can afford to lose him per se. Do you want to lose him? No, you don't. And then I look at it from the Pittsburgh Steelers angle. I'm kind of torn because here's the thing.
Hmm.
On paper, he seems like he'd be great there. And if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have a guy like TJ Watt, who's also an amazing player on one end.
He is.
He also gets hurt a lot too. And so if you're thinking about bringing in another type of, let's say, quote unquote, franchise type of edge rusher who also has a history of being hurt. So now you're going to have two bookends that are always hurt. And that's a lot of dough to be investing in a team that, I think a lot of people would say the Pittsburgh Steelers are, I wouldn't say Super Bowl contenders, but they're a little bit above average, I would say. And I feel like they maybe have some other areas that maybe they probably should address. So for me, I think he should stay in Washington. I think so. But again, it all boils down to the new ownership. Obviously, with the Commanders, what's going to happen with that? Do they feel like they want to invest in a guy like that? Considering that they still have like three other really super talented guys that they're going to have to pay some of those guys too, and they may lose out on one of those guys, obviously.
They will.
But it seems
There's
like
no way
right
they
now,
can keep all those players.
yeah, there's no way. But I feel like right now Chase Young, only because of the injuries, is the kind of the odd man out.
Exactly.
So it's a very rough situation for him. Do you think? Are there any other? I know you don't want to see him go, but do you think there's anyone else out there that could realistically make a push for him at this point?
I mean, there's Pittsburgh. I mean, I don't know any particular team. I would trade him to the AFC. I
Yeah,
definitely want to
get
keep
him
him
out of
in the NFC because
yeah.
we're gonna have to deal with him for a long period of time. I don't know who
Oh,
is actually maybe the Patriots.
yeah.
So they could add some defense.
Yes,
Although
but
I
as a
like
defense.
Matthew Judon. I love Matthew Judon.
And we got a comment here from Patrick.
Patrick.
He's mentioning Detroit could
Oh
possibly see
yeah,
a
I
trade
forgot Detroit.
with Aiden Hutchinson and maximize their roster. So yeah, not bad. Aiden Hutchinson, he's looks like he's coming on as a beast. You pair him on the other side. But again, I still think he'll find a way to stay in Washington. I think they got to keep him. 11 million is a lot though for a guy that hasn't really played a full season since he's been in the National Football League. But once
Right.
he's on the field, there's no telling what he can do once he's given that option. So Richard Cole says, let's see, the Commanders need to find a way to keep him. Some of his injury falls on the conditioning
Coach
coach
as
as
well.
well. Okay, interesting take on that. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Yeah, some teams don't have a lot of injuries. You look at the Baltimore Ravens, but last couple of years, they've guys are just falling left and right. Um, yeah, some of that too is, and I don't know Chase Young. I don't know what his offseason regimen is. I don't know if he takes care of his body the way he probably should be. I would assume he does. You would think so. But then you got some guys that are just injury prone, and he just might be one of those types of guys that it doesn't matter what he does. Um,
But it is shocking
he can
though,
work
Ryan,
out.
because again, he's from Ohio State. And
Yeah,
what I've seen is a pattern of players like the Bosa brothers, Joey and Nick. They've
yeah,
had their
yeah. Heard a lot
injury,
too. Yeah.
and then with Chase Young. So is it like coincidence or
That's a good point. Yeah, you know what? And the same thing goes for those Alabama boys too. Nick Saban runs those guys into the ground. They play them a lot. They work them hard, and then they get in the NFL, and they just break down within a couple of years. Now, obviously, there's some outliers out there, but it seems like Ohio State could be the next, Justin Fields getting hurt.
right?
I don't know. So that's an excellent point, and maybe Chase Young. I wouldn't say he's past his prime, but perhaps maybe he's got a lot. He's got a lot of wear and tear already on him already. And the funny thing is that he sit out like the last couple games of his last year. I forgot what the story on him
He only
was.
played like I think 3 games,
Yeah,
and
because
that's
because
about
he
it.
got hurt. Didn't he get
Yes,
hurt? I think, and then he just ended up sitting out the rest of the year. So
right,
I don't know, man. If I'm the Commanders, you want to keep him,
right.
but I don't think you can keep him at the end of the day, especially not at 11 million. Now, if he wants to restructure, that's one thing. And it's sad because of the talent that he has,
And
you
the
know,
upside.
and the upside is crazy, but those darn injuries, man, it really hampers your team. Your
But
team.
here's the but here's the concern for me, Brian. I'm sorry to cut you off, but
No, good.
if we didn't pick up his 5th-year option, and if he has, let's say hypothetically, a great season,
Right.
then we have to take care of him because again, the Giants, they made the mistake with Daniel Jones. They didn't pick
Yeah.
up his 5th-year option.
Yeah.
He had a solid good year last year, helped him get to the playoffs, win a playoff game, and then he was compensated.
Right.
So if we're Washington and if that situation hypothetically, if that happens, how's that going to help us in cap space and stuff?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think the Commanders are probably just they're rolling the dice on this one. I think they probably feel, listen, the guy hasn't played a full season yet for us. We have other guys in the barnyard there that can still get the job done and still be on the field. We're willing to let him to walk if that's the case, or at least test the free agency market. And not to say that he doesnn't get hurt again. And I don't wish that on anyone, obviously. But there is what's the word? There's not a precedence, but there is a pattern that
Yeah.
that that he's following. He has not been healthy completely since he's been in the league, and I think they're banking on that. So it's going to be an interesting situation. The Steelers, on paper, it seems good, right? When you read the newspapers, you throw Chase Young's name in Google or you search it up, the Steelers pop up immediately. I'm not a big fan of it again because of the injuries. Only if the money wasn't what isn't what it is right now. And if
Right.
it's because it's over 10 million. So that's a lot of money to be investing in a guy on top of that. Like I said again, you got the other guy on the other end, TJ Watt, who's a phenomenal pro bowler, defensive, all defensive kind of guy.
Defensive player
Um,
of the year.
but defensive player of the year, thank you. But also gets hurt. So what if they're both hurt at the same time? It's like you can't get honestly, it boils down to money for me when I think about this stuff. The fans that watch, NFL casually, they think it's, Madden, the Madden Ultimate Team. That's great, right? When you're playing video games, but in real life,
Right.
these guys got to be on the field, and if they're not on the field, man, it's like, what's the point?
Right.
So, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with him. But hey, Parnell, man, appreciate you coming on, man, and talking a little bit of Commanders.